Hey, welcome. This is a video podcast from the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, where today we're going to be recounting a forum that we held on July 22nd. This was a traffic safety forum, one of a few similar forums that we would have or summits, and in which we discussed and invited speakers to come in and provide solutions, real practical solutions on how to continue to reduce vehicle crashes, injuries, and fatalities. My name is Nick Brule. I'm a senior program manager here at the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund. And my main duty here is to manage our NHTSA contract. We have and have had a long relationship with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They're a tremendous partner of ours. And what I do is I go through all of the fatality data that we get here at the Memorial Fund to try and find commonalities and what is happening in crashes so that we can get that information not only to NHTSA, but out to the field to try and avoid similar occurrences. So over this video podcast, if you will, you're going to hear us discussing the events of the day, and we're going to bring up some clips to give you a flavor of exactly what our very prestigious speakers were talking about. But this way, you don't have to read a report. You're not going to get mired in a long sort of recitation of the entire 5 or 6 hour day. And I think we'll be able to discuss and pull out the really important salient points. So if I can, let me start by introducing Troy Anderson. He is the Executive Director of the Officer Safety and Wellness Division here at the Memorial Fund. Troy?
Thanks, Nick. And, for everybody who's watching this right now, I just want to thank you for your commitment to officer safety and wellness, because this is such an important topic to discuss, especially as we look at officer traffic safety and fatalities, which is a genuine concern, not only for our organization, but I think collectively for the nation as a whole. I am the retired director of the Connecticut State Police Trooper Wellness program there. I ran a number of programs in Connecticut that were specifically designed to promote wellness and also officer safety. So we're continuing that mission here. We've got a great team, and we brought in a number of very talented individuals for this forum. And I think you are going to be able to have some very key takeaways here that are going to be very beneficial for you and your organization. So thanks again for watching.
Thank you, Troy. And now Matt. Matt Garcia is also a member of our team. He works on several different programs here at the Memorial Fund. I'll let Matt go ahead and introduce himself.
Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure to be a part of this. But as my role with the Memorial's Deputy Director for our Officer Safety and Wellness programs, and really with a focus on those programs throughout the country that are really working to keep our officers safe. This forum that you were so instrumental in putting together allowed me to not only engage with officers and see exactly what's out there, but a lot of what was brought up, and we'll go over that in today, was very relevant throughout my 26 years in law enforcement, and seeing still some of the same mistakes being made. And I know we're going to touch upon that. So this forum was a fantastic way to draw light upon some of those issues. The speakers that you had were absolutely phenomenal, and the information that they shared and that they gave. And it really was a pleasure to hear this. And I'm very encouraged too for my brothers and sisters out there still working day to day, because they have at their disposal now technology that we did not have. And they also have resources out there and networking that was just not, it was not something that we were familiar with or was in abundance when we were started. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, Matt, that was really well said. And I appreciate that. And for those of you who don't know, so I'm surrounded by 2 state troopers, and I'm a city cop from here in Washington, D.C. So we all kind of bring perhaps different perspectives in this effort. So what happened during this forum was we invited a number of speakers, some of whom you may have heard before, but we also tried to get some new faces to help, as Matt said, to continue to bring light and to get us to focus on those issues that we can change. So our CEO, Bill Alexander, came out, and this was sponsored by NHTSA as well as Wheelan Engineering. If you guys aren't familiar with Wheelan Engineering, they have some tremendous products. They're also from Connecticut, where both of my colleagues are from. You guys know Wheelan. We didn't have Wheelan in my agency, but let's talk a little bit about their package. I mean, it seems to me that they're really, I would say, one of the more innovative companies out there in terms of law enforcement safety. Would you agree?
No, I definitely agree. I think that they are not only their technology is just incredibly advanced, but their engagement in the law enforcement community. I see them at trade shows, I see them at events. I see them sponsoring a race car where they honor the names of the fallen, and they prominently display our logo. They are a wonderful organization, and they have really just been a tremendous partner, and they were beyond thrilled to be able to join us with this forum. So it was great to have them come out, just not only their presence, but to discuss some of the new emerging technology that certainly will save lives.
Yeah, I agree, and I have been impressed by their light bar programs. They're working with Haas Alerts, and so Bill Alexander introduced Chris Watkins, who is an engineer at Wheelan Engineering, and he discussed and took us through some of the new things that they're working on. One of the things I'll mention, and then we'll go to a clip from Chris where he demonstrates one of the new technologies they have. But as a city cop, intersections were always a problem when you were going code. We called it code 1, other people call it code 3, when you're running priority. And in my career, we had several collisions between scout cars or squad cars, whatever you may call them, at intersections. And Chris Watkins introduced two things that will help mitigate those. One is a new technology where they can take over the intersection ahead of the police vehicle and get all green lights, which, again, for urban law enforcement is, I think, fantastic. But then the next thing that he introduced was a collision avoidance system between responding patrol cars. And he took us through and showed a video, which we're going to show you now, of how a police officer responding or in a pursuit or responding to a code 1 call or priority call can avoid a collision with another emergency vehicle as both vehicles are alerted to their proximity. So if we could, I'd like to roll that clip.
This is what the officer sees in the vehicle. This is the control panel that they typically control their lights and sirens with. And you're going to hear an audible beep and obviously see the control panel flash. And I want you to kind of remember this beep because you're going to hear it in the next video. But this, when an officer is about to be in a collision with another emergency vehicle, this is what they get in the vehicle. Now, this is a pursuit of a stolen vehicle. Pursuit's been going on for a little bit of time, just showing you a small clip of this, but you're going to hear some things. So first, this is a patrol Mustang. You're going to hear a very loud grumble of the engine as he's in a hot pursuit. And about 5 seconds into the video, you're going to hear that beep. So know that that officer is what he's seeing inside the vehicle and the audible beep that he's getting. And you're going to recognize that exhaust starts to calm down. He's letting off the gas. He's building some distance in between the vehicle that he's chasing because he knows very soon ahead there's a potential collision with another emergency vehicle. The officer also starts to over-communicate location with his teammates out in the field. So you're going to hear a lot of radio traffic. It's really hard to understand, but he's communicating with the other officers in the area to let them know exactly where he is and what intersection they're approaching. So I'm going to let it play out and I'll talk a little bit about it. So you hear the beep. You see the engines come down a little bit and he's now communicating heavily on the radio, building a little bit of distance in between him and the suspect. emergency vehicle approaching from the left. As soon as he knows he's clear, he's right back into the chase.
And it might have been a little difficult to hear the beep, 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 beep. But what happens is the control panel for the lights and sirens and your alley lights and everything flickers and gives you an audible alert as well as a visual alert that you, within 30 seconds, are about to come in contact with another emergency vehicle. So I really thought that this was a very valuable and new technology that hopefully will be inputted into a lot of our patrol cars. And one of the things that we see a lot in the Memorial Fund as I go through crashes at intersections. It's just so common, and usually while on a code response to a priority run or in a pursuit. What else did you guys think about Chris and Wheelan?
Well, one of the things that I always think of when we look at emerging technology is sometimes the pushback that you get from administration in reference to resources. This is going to be very costly. And having worked in an organization and having been a part of line of duty deaths and seeing the actual cost of what that is, the cost of a loss of a life, the reverberating effect that happens not just through the department but the entire community, it's huge. It's huge. You can't even compare the two. When you see technology like this, that it is clear that not only has it the very real potential of saving lives, but also giving the officers the confidence that the administration is investing in them, because that is an investment in your people and an investment in your community. So I think it's important when you're a purchaser or a law enforcement administrator, you're involved in that chain somewhere along the way. You have to find a way to make those resources work. You have to find a way, because one life, what is one life worth? And I think the answer is certainly more than upfitting your existing equipment in order to make it the best that it can be for your personnel.
Yeah.
Chief Flory later on in the forum had talked about even though it being an outlier was a preventable accident that cost his agency $14 million. One incident that cost his agency $14 million. Another thing that Chris had talked about, and Nick, you had touched upon it, was that vehicle preemption, the request green light, and he threw out two numbers that I thought were incredibly relevant, especially for those who are the policy and decision makers within their agency. But that green light technology had led to 75% fewer intersection collisions, while they also saw an increase of 25% in response time. So you're getting there faster and significantly less intersection collisions.
Yeah.
So the numbers there speak for themselves about the benefits of this technology for officers.
Yeah, and that is something that, as you look at it, as it said, it reduces crashes and gets you there faster. Like, so what's not to like, right?
Right.
I always am fascinated by Wheelan Engineering and a lot of the things they do. One of the things, as Troy mentioned, they for the last few years have one of their sponsored NASCAR race cars outfitted with our logo. On the back deck is the name of every law enforcement officer who died in the line of duty that previous year. And then tying into our NHTSA friends, which again I always think is humorous, on the back bumper of the race car is one of the slow down and move over stickers with an arrow indicating that you should slow down and move over. Again, I always thought that was good, but that's one of the things that we promote strongly here. We're working with our NHTSA partners on enhancing some of the slow down and move over messaging. So you might hear more about that from us later. So then as we moved on from Chris Watkins, Bill then introduced the chief counsel of NHTSA, Mr. Peter Simshauser. And Mr. Simshauser was kind enough to come and talk to us. He's new to NHTSA, but he spoke very eloquently about everything that NHTSA is doing and is planning on doing. Everything from continuing programs like Click It or Ticket, Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over, and some of their other safety initiatives. But one of the things he did mention on, and I'd love to get your guys' take on it because it was totally new to me, and we can play the clip in a second. He's talking about transfusions in crash scenes on scene, saving lives. And this is something I had heard before a little bit earlier from one of our below 100 partners, but I have never imagined that one of the sort of interdictions or safety measures we would take, emergency medical protocols that we would take on the field would be to give transfusions for people who are, bleeding out or having injuries that caused a great deal of exsanguination. What did you guys think of that?
Well, for me, I just think that we take so many pages out of the playbook that the military uses, right? Think about when we started in law enforcement, how many officers 30 plus years ago were wearing tourniquets on their belt. Tourniquets existed, but we weren't.
And Troy, you were in the military for a number of years.
Correct. So I think once we started seeing the field use of those in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they saw the inherent benefit and survivability of engaging with tourniquets, and then of course from there, then they started doing transfusions out in the field in the military, and that's where we're taking that from. And of course, we know that law enforcement, being very paramilitary, and a lot of veterans or even citizen soldiers that are currently still serving in the military are part of the law enforcement vocation. I think we're just taking those pages, and we're realizing that these are steps that we can take to eliminate, prevent to some extent, or certainly reduce the number of line of duty deaths. And you know that that's what we look at all day. We have all of this proprietary data on what is killing our officers, and these are the things that are killing our officers. And I know that they're difficult conversations to have sometimes, but you need to have those conversations, because it's not a matter of if a law enforcement line of duty death will happen, but when. But also, we are looking, more importantly, I think, from our perspective right now, at looking at these preventable deaths. So if it is predictable, it's preventable. Thank you, Gordon Graham. But the reality is we want to prevent them. And we can see both sides. We see how they're dying, and we can also see how we can make this more survivable. So I think it's fantastic that NHTSA is looking at that. I think it's great that the law enforcement community is accepting of some of these really terrific ideas that'll really help keep names off the wall, which is, of course, part of our mission.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think the fact that they've partnered with DoD for this, and this is a $30 million initiative, and right now you've got 25 locales throughout the country taking part in this program. So there's plenty of room for other agencies to implement this, but it shows the relevance and the importance that this partnership is putting on that, and taking care of it on the scene, and recognizing that there is a big gap, and we're missing the boat on things that we could do from the scene before we ever even get to the hospital. So the fact that you have leaders throughout the country that are recognizing the importance of this and starting to implement it, hopefully, right, we're going to see this now grow throughout the country, especially in a lot of your urban areas, and then right with our background in state police, on the highway, because you have very remote parts of the country where you're just too far away from a hospital or an ER that you could bring somebody to. So getting this technology out into the field rather than waiting for you to get driven there is going to be critical.
Yeah, I was really surprised by it. And I think there's some logistic issues with regard to maintaining or keeping that supply of blood or plasma, and keeping it to a point where it's able to be deployed and used quickly. And of course, there's the training side that goes with all that. But this is beyond just EMTs, I believe they're looking at. And for me, and one of the things, the themes that came out of this whole forum was a cultural shift. And I think Troy touched on it. I think you just touched on it by mentioning leadership, is that I'm hopeful that we're finally getting law enforcement's head out of the sand with regard to, and you mentioned Chief Flory, and at one point he says, oh, that's the way we've always done it, and that he's so tired of hearing that, and so tired of hearing the thing that we always joke about. There are two things that cops hate: the way things are and change, right? Well,
Right.
we've got to get out of that. And I think our forum is pushing law enforcement to do that. And certainly advocating for a cultural change is one of the solutions that I think in itself that we're presenting. So part of this forum, and I think one of the more exciting parts, and it's certainly a part that drew a number of people to want to be there in person, Just for those who are seeing this video podcast, we had an in-person audience in the theater at the National Law Enforcement Museum, but we also live streamed it, and a number of people tuned in, and we had a fairly good size crowd there in person. And there were a couple of individuals who really made sure they were there in person, because part of the forum was to honor a member of NHTSA, but also a member of law enforcement who has dedicated his life to not just law enforcement, but to safety, and particular officer safety. So Troy presented John Marshall, who is ironically the son of Justice Thurgood Marshall, who became a Virginia State Trooper. And we presented John Marshall with an award. So it's an award in his name. And Troy, if you could just tell us about that moment, because John Marshall has been a great advocate for the Memorial Fund, as well as he was the director of, I think, their safety programs at NHTSA for years.
He's just a terrific human being. And, when we were thinking about creating this award, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have him in mind immediately. It's in his name. This is a man who has committed his life to saving officers, to make it safer for those who serve. And again, that is our mission. John is an incredible human being. He's a brilliant man. He's engaging. He's got such rich life experience, but he is selfless in his dedication to this country. And when he was a state trooper in the state of Virginia, and one of the things that I mentioned when I presented him that award is that I know in his heart he will always be a state trooper. And that he says very often, once a trooper, always a trooper. And he's just an incredible human being. It was just great to spend some time with him. I know that the award meant a lot to him, meant a lot to his family, but I hope that he understands how much he means to the law enforcement community for his commitment to excellence and making sure that they are genuinely looked out for. And his leadership it's going to be very difficult to fill those shoes. We miss him already. And I know the law enforcement community will, but that was just a small part that we could play in giving him the warm and generous send-off that he so well deserved. So it was great to be up there. It was a real honor for me to be able to present that as a state trooper. Meant a lot to me. I know it meant a lot to our organization, but more importantly, I know it meant a whole lot to him and his family.
Yeah. And Matt, I don't know that you had a chance to ever meet him prior to that, but certainly you got to see and hear what he had to say, and the reaction of I mentioned a number of people who literally traveled thousands of miles, one person in particular, to be there to see the presentation of that award. What did you think?
Yeah, so it was my first time meeting him in person, although very familiar with the name, and he has come up in a number of our meetings. What stood out for me with John Marshall was not just the speech that he gave, the acceptance speech that he gave, and the humility in that, but also his family. He was very front and center with recognizing his family that was there, and to me that speaks about his character, and then the drive behind what he does. Right, so it's coming from a place where there's a true passion for the work that he's done over the years, both with Virginia State Police, with the Marshals, his work with NHTSA, and his work overall in traffic safety. He's got a passion for keeping officers safe, and that came through and resonated in his acceptance speech and the work that he's done. And I remember when he was finished speaking, and I know this is sort of uh, an end to a very, if you will, a very active career. But I couldn't help but thinking, like, he's not done. He's not done.
He's not ready to hang it up. No,
no, he's not done.
He did say, once a trooper, always a trooper. And he was so impressed and pleased to get the award from another trooper. And it seems like you guys definitely have your state police ethos that carries through, that maybe some of us municipal guys don't have. And he told several poignant stories. One poignant story, though, that I want to share with you was his recognition of how he needs to check himself. And he describes having an epiphany one day as a trooper responding to a crash scene. And I'll let that clip play of John Marshall.
And we were doing strictly traffic. We wouldn't take calls or anything. It was strictly traffic in those cars. But there was a bad crash that I heard, and I needed to respond to this crash. And I will never forget going down Interstate 95, and these Mustangs were and still are incredibly fast. And I remember looking down at the speedometer. As I'm responding to a crash, I'm going 130 miles an hour. And it was at that point that I literally saw my two little girls go by me. And I said, what in the world am I doing going 130 miles an hour? And I slowed it down. And I'm glad I did. Because that taught me a lot about what we need to do our job. And we can't do it if we don't do it safely.
That hit home with me, and I hope, the point being is other people have to take lessons away from some of the old timers or people who've had those revelations. And that was a big takeaway when he was probably not that old as a trooper, when he had that realization, what am I doing? I'm going to hurt myself or hurt somebody else. And, it's something that I really, and if you got it through that clip, I mean, it really resonated with me. And in that clip, it looked like that there was a shot of his family there. One of the family members was helping because he had a young grandchild with him, I believe. And to Matt's point, he had his family with him. That's how touched he was by this award. And I'm just so happy we were able to do that.
Nick, I know you and I know Troy, you came up in an era where we were always taught you leave home at home and work at work. And it's because that line blurred at 130 miles per hour. He was able to see, hey, you don't leave it. If he crashes at 130 miles per hour, it's his family. It's all of those outside of work that are ultimately going to live with those consequences. And he was able to draw from that. And I think that's important for every officer. You have to be, and that resonates through everything we do. When you're going to a call and you're using tactics, and we've talked about complacency, remember those in your life that are going to be left picking up the pieces. And if you can prevent something, do it.
Yeah. And as I do the research that I do for NHTSA, and I particularly when I'm looking at single vehicle crashes, one of the things that is a very common theme, apart from the fact that most of those officers are also not wearing their seatbelt, is speed. And some of the speed that they get off of those modules when the reconstructionists pull the EDM or the ECM module off of that vehicle, 115, 120 miles an hour to get to a call for service. And it's a waste, and it's just way too fast. I call it ludicrous speed. And I know for some folks in our country, particularly, troopers or even sheriffs who are 35 miles from that crash scene, they need to and want to get there. Just like below 100 says, you've got to watch your speed. And again, the old adage, you can't help anybody if you don't arrive. So,
well, I think Nick, when you look at that, and this is when I was a supervisor in the state police, and the capabilities of these cars sometimes far excel beyond the ability of some police officers to drive it. And I would always say, just because you can does not mean that you should, right? Like
right.
You really need to evaluate. And when I was thinking about what John Marshall had said in that 130 mile an hour epiphany, probably going down 95, I think every officer has that epiphany, whether it's they were going too fast or they put themselves in a situation where when they look back in hindsight, they thought, and I think for some, and even myself, that didn't come until after I had already retired from the job and just
right.
look back sort of holistically at my entire career and thought about some of those situations along the way, times that, you look back and you say, by the grace of God, go I. How did I get through
a lot of us have oh shit moments, right? Hopefully we can learn from those if we had a near miss. And I had a few in my career, and I tried to apply those lessons so that I didn't, race through that intersection again, or turn that corner too fast, or, whatever it was that I was doing. And then all of a sudden realized I'd put myself in a vulnerable position or a
Sure.
bad position. Yeah, being able to learn from those things. And some officers don't seem to be able to do that, it seems like.
And I think that's part of the inherent benefit of this forum, exactly is what you're talking about. You shouldn't have to wait until you're done with your career, or you shouldn't have to wait until
Right.
you're going 130 miles an hour. Learn from the folks that have been there, right? These are people that have lived experiences, people who
Right.
have had their own come to Jesus moment, if you will, where they have
Right.
realized, wow, I really need to reevaluate my approach here, because there's a balance in life, and I am throwing the balance off. So I think it's just, that's the importance, I think, of having a forum, of hearing all these different voices sort of echoing the same sentiment, which is that just because we've done things the same way for so many years doesn't mean that it's right. It sometimes means that we need to change. This is a very evolutionary profession. We have to change in order to keep up with it, and especially when you're looking at officer safety issues. Learn from the people who have been there and have survived it.
Yep. Yep. So to that end, one of the things as we put this forum together, I always felt very strongly that it's interesting, but it also reminds people of the toll that this job can take, particularly as it relates to vehicle crashes and vehicle related injuries, roadside crashes. And I thought it would be good to have a case study of a fatal law enforcement traffic related fatality. And so, to that end, we invited Detective James Milligan, who's from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, to come and talk about a double fatal law enforcement crash that the Nevada State Police asked LVMPD to investigate. This happened within the city limits of, I think it's Clark County that's out there, but within the jurisdiction of the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. And two state troopers were killed. Trooper Alberto Felix and Sergeant Michael Abate were both struck and killed by an impaired driver who then fled the scene. And if you can, I would encourage you to find, it's on YouTube. You can find the full recorded forum. And Detective Milligan really took us through a very, very detailed recounting of how that investigation went, how they recovered evidence. And, I'd like, if we could, to talk about that case, and then we'll show a clip in a minute that will just give an audience an idea of the scope of that investigation. But Matt, what did you find as a sort of, not a takeaway, but what were your thoughts after listening to Detective Milligan's presentation on that double fatal?
Yeah, I broke it down in several different ways. So one, there is the emotional aspect of the story, right? Every officer listening to that story, if you haven't heard it, I implore you to listen to his presentation. But you can empathize with the responding officer who arrives and cannot find his partners. And what initially must have been going through his head as he starts to put everything together. And so being able to carry on with the job when you have such a traumatic scene out there. So there was the emotional aspect of the story, the investigative aspect, what they did to track down the driver of that car in a relatively short period of time, where they were actually able to get a DUI conviction off of that, was just absolutely amazing. The work and the teamwork that went into that. And then thirdly, the studying just the dangers and looking at what could have been done differently, maybe to have protected that scene, right? To prevent it, because that's ultimately what this forum is about, right? We want to prevent the deaths. We want to prevent the names from going up on the wall, and taking an honest look and saying, hey, what could have been done to prevent something like that from happening? So I thought it was a fantastic presentation. And like I said, take the time to listen to it, even listen to it a couple of times, because there are so many takeaways from those three areas there. He really did. He gave a great overview, detailed, and I thought he did it respectfully too. I mean, we don't need, officers don't necessarily need to see all of the pictures. We understand what happened, and we understand the impact. of what that looks like. So he did I thought overall his presentation not only paid homage to those detectives who put it all together, but also was very respectful of those officers who were killed out there on the scene that day.
Yeah, yeah. Troy?
I couldn't agree with Matt more. I mean, the investigative steps were just absolutely incredible. The department seemed to work like a well-oiled machine. Everybody knew exactly what they needed to do. And having come from an organization, I think that I have a tremendous amount of respect for, even though I was never a major crime investigator. That wasn't the path that I took in my career. I have the utmost respect for them, especially when they come together in this very honorable and noble way to investigate two state troopers who were killed in the line of duty, and the efficiency and the way that they put that together was just incredible. I thought the presentation was magnificent. I mean, it really, I would encourage folks to watch that, because there are a couple key points, and some of those are when you're learning about the actual physical evidence and where some of it was found, how it was located, how far away, how it was detected, really was just, I mean, I was impressed with the work that they did. And I mean, I just can't say enough good about how that whole thing went.
Yes, and on that point, let's look at that clip, which is just one segment of his presentation where he discusses some of the physical evidence that he had to recover from that scene.
Here's an example of some of the parts left behind. You have a mirror cover, a fog lamp, and some broken headlight lens. And then looking at the troopers' belts, there's white paint transfer. So we collected samples of that. We also collected the white paint samples off of the ground, should we need it for forensic analysis later on. We also took care into recovering the troopers' belongings. We didn't want to leave anything out there for someone to come by and pick up. We wanted to give it back to the families or to the state police to where it belongs. So a couple examples of that is we actually found Sergeant Abate's nameplate stuck in the tire of a LVMPD patrol vehicle that arrived on the D Street connector. And Trooper Felix's badge was found underneath the Jeep. Now, Sergeant Abate's badge was not found at the scene. So at that point, we had 2 squads of patrol detectives literally walk from the scene to the apartment complex looking for that badge. We didn't want anyone else to pick it up.
The thing about this case, and one of the reasons I did ask for this detective and to cover this case, was the fact that their investigation into this crash, they put a ton of resources into it. And just so the audience knows, they found that sergeant's badge inside the suspect vehicle, the striking vehicle, where he had crashed the windshield, been struck by the front right of the vehicle and struck the windshield, and his badge was ripped off and ended up resting inside that suspect's vehicle. And that guy fled. And what I think one of the other things about this investigation that impressed me was the detective retraced this individual's steps using surveillance cameras, and he's in Las Vegas. Everything's on film, right? And this guy had been drinking at casinos. He had been going in and buying multiple different of the same type of vodka, but going to different stores. And he went and got video from each one of those places, was able to document how much roughly he consumed over that period of time, even got surveillance of him running a red light as he fled the scene, and then getting apartment video showing this guy staggering up to his door, trying to get his key and not even able to, unlock his own apartment door. So he got some tremendous evidence that ultimately got a full conviction for the driving while intoxicated or impaired, as well as the hit and run and all the subsequent charges. So I was really very impressed with that. Again, the police did everything they needed to do to recover all that evidence. And like he said, walking the scene, walking all the way from that scene to the apartment complex, looking for that badge. Well, the next thing that happened at the forum is we broke for lunch, and during lunch, I just gave a quick overview of where we were, meaning where the nation was in terms of our latest fatality statistics with regard to law enforcement struck-bys, motorcycle crashes, and vehicle crashes. And so for those of you who don't know, we do track struck-by crashes. We then have a category for motorcycle crashes. And then in automobile crashes, we have a subcategory, which is single vehicle crashes. crashes, which you heard me mention before. And that's an important category because those are largely preventable. And one of the things I let the audience know, and one of the things that I think we may talk a little bit more about, is that right now, even as we are recording this, which is a little bit after the forum, the numbers comparatively are still low compared to where they were in 2024. But one of the more startling numbers is the fact that, and I don't want to jinx us or anything, but there have been no single vehicle crashes this year. Normally at this point, we would have had 5, and on average, 4 single vehicle fatal crashes, and we've had none. I always want to find the silver lining in things. I'm hoping that that continues. And that's one of the things I gave in a brief overview over lunch. Following lunch, and I hope, and if you haven't heard of them, I hope you've heard of Below 100. We had 2 members of our Below 100 of the Below 100 team who are now our partners here at the Memorial Fund. Through NHTSA, we've been giving some additional funding to help expand Below 100's ability to take training out to the field. Below 100 is a safety training organization that has officers focus on 5 core tenets, but beyond that, they are also geared to doing what we've already discussed, changing the culture of law enforcement to a more safety-driven, thoughtful culture. And not only getting us to slow down, but their 5 tenets are wear your seatbelt, watch your speed, remember what's important now. Matt already referenced that, keeping your family in your mind, wear your body armor, and complacency kills. Meaning if you think you've done it before and I've done this, it's going to get you into trouble. So you've got to keep your head in the game. So we heard from 2 important people, one of them who was the founder and architect of Below 100, his name is Dale Stockton. And then we heard from Rob Beidler, who is the former undersheriff of Snohomish County, Washington. Rob gives us a leadership perspective, but Dale, who is a retired captain from the Carlsbad Police Department in California. So one of the things we heard from Dale Stockton is a really important piece on seatbelts. Again, that's a core tenet in Below 100. And apart from reducing your speed and the other things that I mentioned, seatbelts is one of the most important things that we focus on here in the Memorial Fund. I do all the research on seatbelts, and you'll hear Dale talk about the roughly 50% of officers, and that's even confirmed through his data, don't wear their seatbelts. So we'll hear from Dale.
I am confounded to this day why it is so difficult to get police officers to understand that most basic piece of safety equipment, they'll wear their vest. That's pretty much a given these days in most assignments, except when they think they're on training day or they're in an admin position. But for the most part, they're wearing vests. But you're a whole lot more likely to get in a car crash than you are shooting. And we continue to see a high level of non-usage. And why is that? When they enter a profession, they grew up facing backward for the first 2 years of their life, and then in a 6-point harness telling mom and dad as they get to talking, Mommy, Daddy, put on your seatbelt. And somehow we put them through an academy and a field training officer, and boy, they're not wearing a seatbelt. And you heard Susan Moody say he always wore a seatbelt off duty, but on duty, no. And she lost her husband, her 2 daughters lost their dad. We just did a training effort, Below 100 Train the Trainer, and I was stunned that half of the people in that class who showed up to become Below 100 trainers admitted they didn't wear their seatbelt on duty. We can change this.
Troy, what did you think of Dale's presentation as well as, that one clip?
Well, I think, Dale is certainly a very good orator, and I think his message resonates with everybody who's either ever been in law enforcement or is currently serving. When I do find it astounding that when you look at fatality data of officers who are killed in the line of duty in a crash, that half of them are not wearing their seatbelt. I grew up as a child my parents had seatbelts installed in our old Mustang because they didn't come with them back then. And I grew up wearing them, and I never had a time that I got behind the wheel of a police vehicle, whether it was I was a municipal cop or then with the state police. I always wore my seatbelt. And I can't understand it, especially when, like John Marshall says, you're going down the highway at 130. Even with a seatbelt on, that might be difficult to survive. But the reality is, when you look at some of the crashes that Dale was showing, some of the crash photos, and it's kind of like, guess who survived this and guess who didn't. And it's amazing some of the survivable crashes that you see during his presentation. I think that message needs to resonate. I still don't understand how something that is so simple, and I've heard the stories about it gets caught on my vest or something on my belt or the external carrier. None of those stories. That's just, please, let's put this to bed right now. Wear your seatbelt. It's crazy. And if you're a loved one of a law enforcement officer right now who's watching this, please tell them how much they mean to you and how much you'd love them to wear their seatbelt. It's just, if you want to get people, men and women who are doing this job, home at the end of the day, that is the simplest thing that you can do. Simple. It's very easy. So I do think we need some cultural change when it comes to that. I know there's your friend is doing a study on that right now, Nick, and maybe you want to talk about that. I'm not certain if that's going to be a part of this, but I think it should, because any proactive steps that we can take to get officers to have a paradigm shift in the way that they are thinking about that seatbelt, it's amazing to me. I'm still, honestly, I'm blown away by that. I can't. We should be having conversations about so many other things. Seatbelts.
Yeah, I think that's the right thing. I agree. We should have. We shouldn't be even having to talk about this. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So I give Rob a lot of credit, and he was confronted by his own agency when he was in a leadership position, that the tactical vests that they were wearing were made it difficult to unclip in an amount of time that allowed you to get out of the car quickly, right, to chase somebody. And he said, well, statistically, you're going to be killed in a motor vehicle accident by not wearing your seatbelt, as opposed to not being able to unclip and get out and chase somebody quick enough. And so he put it on him. I'm going to do one of two things. If the tactical vests aren't working and not allowing you to clip in, then I'm going to get rid of the tactical vests. And, he played hardball. He was very open about it. And ultimately, his EVOC instructors were able to go back and they trained the department on how to unclip and exit your vehicle expeditiously while wearing the tactical vest. And it needed to be done. And he's right. And that theme came up a couple times during the afternoon sessions, where you're not wearing your seatbelt because you feel you're gaining some sort of tactical advantage. We all were taught, don't wear it because if you get ambushed in your car, you need to be able to get out quickly, right? Statistically, that doesn't happen. I can speak for myself. I was involved in several car accidents while on the job. I was never ambushed in my car. So statistically speaking, I had a greater chance of being hit or being in an accident than being, and I'm sure that number plays out. It's not to say it doesn't happen. We know from the data, the mid-year and the end of the year fatalities reports that come in about officers killed in the line of duty, we see officers that have been shot in their car. Yes, it does happen. We're not ignoring that. But statistically speaking, you are more likely to be killed or seriously injured from not wearing your seatbelt.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned Rob Beidler, who was the second person who spoke along with Dale at below 100. And Rob was very forward thinking in his approach. He is a true leader in his approach, and he did a number of things at his agency to reduce crashes when he was the undersheriff of Snohomish County in Washington. And he, in fact, his agency won the Destination Zero Award for officer traffic safety. I think it was back in 2016, because he was so proactive and so effective at reducing crashes. And I want to play a clip from Rob as he talks about positional authority and leadership.
Who here has positional authority? I'm not going to make you raise your hand. I see lieutenants and sergeants, captains, directors, managers, supervisors, some retired. undersheriffs, sheriffs, people online, who has positional authority? In 2015 at the National Academy, what I realized was, as the undersheriff, I raised my hand and I begged them to promote me. Beg's a strong word, but probably not too far off. Promote me, please. Give me the awesome responsibility of getting everybody home every day. Every one of you that has any kind of positional authority, including FTOs and EVOC instructors, you asked for that. It is your duty to put safety first and not just say safety first, because I was only saying safety first for the longest time. Then I put it first. There's a huge difference. So when you look at all of this data, the deputy that hit that citizen, John's adamant. If I would have gone through all this, he became an instructor. He was charged criminally. We retained him. And he became an instructor. He now preaches this. He does truly, to his core. If I would have had this, that wouldn't have happened. So what did that make me think? I was too late. I was too late for that man. What if I had done it earlier? A year, 2 years? How many lives would have been changed? For all of you, don't wait. Don't do what I did. Make the realization now so you don't get a man like that you have to wish that you could have saved and that he could walk again.
That's a powerful clip from Rob. And if you happen to notice the chart on that clip, the yellow line was tracking how crashes went down in his organization under his leadership, with all of the traffic safety things that he had implemented, using telematics, having a seatbelt policy, having supervisors, engaging with their subordinates to ensure they're following the rules. And the line on that graph goes back up after Rob leaves. So and someone else came in and may not have necessarily put in the effort and the leadership necessary to keep driving those numbers down. And so it is a great, I think, example of leadership, but also Rob's passion for reducing these crashes and preventing what's preventable, and also changing the culture within his organization. You guys have any other comments on Dale or Rob? Anything else you want to fill in?
I think you're right there on point with certainly Rob as a leader, and leaders lead from the front. They lead by example, they lead with authority, and they lead with compassion. And it takes a lot of courage to be an effective leader, right? And I know that all of us here and anybody who's watching has worked for both effective and non-effective leaders. Yeah. And we see how, sadly, you might get an elected leader or an appointed leader that comes in and, they could be there for 10 years and their success is marked by nothing, stat and nothing. And then you have people that come in to make genuine organizational change. And you were right when you said passion, Nick. It is a passion for your folks, for the people that work for you, because it's not just the people that are on your department. It is your entire community. They have entrusted that you are going to lead your folks and provide them with what they need. And I think Rob did a fantastic job and really owning that. He owned that leadership. That was his. And if his department succeeded, he would let his men and women take the bows, and if they failed, he would take responsibility for that. And I think the heat. Yeah, that's huge. And I think we don't see that enough. I hope we're seeing it more. I hope that the folks that are watching this right now are thinking about those good leaders, and perhaps they are those good leaders. And if not, maybe they're aspiring to be those good leaders, because we need more of them.
Yeah, I agree. So then the next group that we had two guys share the stage. And we wanted them to engage the audience, both virtual and in person, which they did. And we had Noel March, who is not only a Memorial Fund ambassador, he's a retired chief from Maine, and he's the director of the University of Maine's Community Policing Institute. Noel has a lot of experience in law enforcement, and we paired him with retired Chief David Flory, who's retired from Hot Springs, Arkansas, as well as, I think, Dallas PD. And he is a member of the Intergovernmental Institute Research Institute, IIR. He's a lead instructor for both Valor as well as Safe Leo. Matt is part of Safe Leo. I was a Safe Leo trainer. And Dave Flory has a great deal of experience in tactical medicine, which he also trains on. So we got these two guys together to engage the audience and try and figure out what it is from the audience, why officers don't wear their seatbelts, also what some of the bad behavior is that officers can engage in that may hurt our reputation with the community. And I appreciated the fact that Noel March addressed that right out of the gate. He sort of had a bee in his bonnet about seeing cops sending the wrong message. So if we can, let's play a clip from Noel March as he talks about us sort of negating some of the public support we can get by our own behavior.
Last year, 56% weren't wearing seatbelts. And when I see the amount of speeding police cars unnecessarily, and then those two things, those incidents resulting in collisions. And number two, the public perception, by the way, it's 2025, and we need all of the deposits in the community support bank account that we could possibly get. I'm a community policing guy. And I'm here to tell you, and I'm probably not telling anything new, when our marked units, even our unmarked, everybody knows what an unmarked police car is for the most part, go flying by in the fast lane and go and are, tailgating, flashing lights move. Oh, they must be going somewhere important. No, the public typically says, I received a speeding ticket for doing the same thing. And that is just absolutely incongruent with our goals of gaining public trust and support.
So I really appreciated Noel's passion about this, and I'll have us discuss both of what they did in a second. The next thing is we had David Flory, whom I introduced, and Dave he touched on a couple of things. One of the things which I already quoted was, well, that's the way we've always done it. That excuse that we hear all the time. And sort of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's okay. But that just closes you off from not looking at alternatives or embracing new technology, embracing new ideas, and getting away from one paradigm into another one. Dave spoke on several things, but he had a fascinating story that he told about an individual who he admonished about wearing their seatbelt and how that individual later sent him images of the crashes he survived because he did wear his seatbelt. Go ahead and run that clip if we could.
One of our trainers had a guy that just frustrated the heck out of him because he wouldn't wear a seatbelt. And he came up with this, and it worked. What he did was he put a piece of paper in front of him and a pen and said, write it right now. And the guy looks at him like, what? He says, I want to know what I'm supposed to tell your wife when you die because you're not wearing a seatbelt, because I'm the one that's going to go talk to her. And the guy just looked at him. And he looks at the paper, he looks at him, and he just kind of bows his head. 2 weeks later, they're across the intersection from each other, like you can see, what's going on in the other car. And he's doing this with a seatbelt because it convinced him that peer-to-peer is so powerful.
Can I give one story real quick, Nick, on that? So one of our instructors is a sergeant with Texas Department of Highway Patrol who was going through what we call our spin-up process to be an NLERS instructor, and had been running calls with a sheriff's deputy in Falls County, Texas, and had been noticing that deputy had not been wearing his seatbelt. And once he was kind of convicted in our program to be an instructor, he goes back and has a conversation with this guy and hands him a piece of paper and says, write down 3 names of the people that I need to go tell your family members who to tell if you die in a collision and you're not wearing your seatbelt. Right. 2 weeks later, that deputy texted him a picture, was in a head-on collision, texted him a picture, says, I'll live because I was wearing my seatbelt. But then it gets better. A year later, he sends him another picture of his Tahoe that he rolled 7 times in a pursuit and said, thank you for saving my life. You held me accountable. You led me to be different and to be better, and you saved my life.
Yeah, that's a great clip. And as you see, there are other stories that sort of come into what we presented on that day during the forum. Matt, let me start with you. What were your takeaways, if anything, from both Noel, whom I know you know, as well as David Flory?
I've had the opportunity to get to know Noel over the last couple of years, and so what Noel brings to the table is really a wealth of experience and a passion for keeping officers safe and for leadership. Chief Flory, I met for the first time, and he was very straightforward. He didn't hold back, and I had the feeling after listening to him that this was the type of chief that not only is he going to hold you accountable, but he holds himself accountable. And so for both speakers, that was important. They understood the role and the importance of being a leader and leading by example. So for Chief Flory, there was something he had drawn light to about officers wearing their vests, and he did it in such a way where he sort of he pointed out an officer in the crowd, and this is what I would be interested, right? Because initially it's we're in this forum, and he points out to the fact that there is an officer there who is asking a question about what can be done. Meanwhile, he's not wearing a vest himself, and Chief Flory didn't let it go. He held him accountable. What I would be interested to know, if it's somewhere between now and the end of that officer's career, that conversation saves his life. Right, because it's
those. That's a great point, Matt. Because he really did. He called out this young, and he was a sergeant, I believe. Mm-hmm. Now, and again, I think all of us, knowing that they're going to a training kind of thing, we might even be inclined not to have our body armor on in a setting like that. But the fact is, they all had their pistols on their sides, their handcuffs, and they were wearing law enforcement shirts. And there were other people there who did have their body armor on, who were attending on duty. And I thought it was something when he called him out. And he did it in a way that didn't really, he didn't shame him, but he just called him out. And I agree with you, Matt. That really showed his leadership style right there, because he wasn't afraid to confront that right there.
Correct. And that led to a conversation about these peer contracts, the ABLE program out of Louisiana, and really officers holding each other accountable. And so I thought that was important too, because that's something else that is a culture change, right? That's not something that we grew up with, this sort of holding each other accountable to that level. And now there are these contracts that officers will sign that say, don't get mad at me when I point something out. You've already signed a contract that allows me to point out when you're screwing up, to keep you safe. I'm gonna point this out, and I like that. I like the way that he addressed that, but I also like the fact that he holds himself accountable, and Noel does the same as well. And from a leader, you're looking for that. Without that, nothing you say matters.
Yep, I agree, Troy.
I think that those two were a genuine brain trust up there. I mean, there was so much information coming and going, and I thought it was great. I think the courageous conversations that you sometimes have with the folks that you work with and care about. We look at the cultural change that has happened in the last few years about this duty to intervene, right? If you have somehow overstepped your boundaries, I need to step in, right? I need to step in. And if that means removing you from the situation or changing the situation, I must do that. Well, if we're going to take that, let's take it a step further. And we are looking at the men and women to the right and left of us that are wearing the same uniform. We're doing the same job. Why aren't we holding them accountable when it's not a roadside situation, when it's just we're having that conversation over a cup of coffee or after roll call or briefing, and we say, listen, even if you don't have a policy that says you have to wear your protective carrier, your vest, your ballistic protection, and I would say that the majority of organizations do, they're provided for them, and wear it, just wear it, right? If you're in an organization, just because it says you don't have to, there's a law in Connecticut that says the police officers can use their cell phone while they're driving. Are you supposed to? Is that a good idea? It says you don't have to wear your seatbelt. Is that a good idea? It's a terrible idea. These are terrible ideas. Think more about, we know too much to get it wrong this time. If you're on your way to a call and you're going code, you probably shouldn't be updating your Instagram status. We know that. So let's have these conversations with each other. When we see those men and women that we work with that we genuinely care about them, and we want them to go home to their families just like we want to go home. Have that courageous conversation. Say, I know this seems awkward because maybe in years past we haven't had to do that. But I can tell you from running a wellness program for years for state troopers that, many of them very stoic in their appearance, much like Easter Island. When I first started talking about self-care, and we're talking about more than 20 years ago now, it fell a little bit short. But I will tell you that 10 years after I started, 15 years after I started those programs, it was not uncommon to hear in a roll call situation of a trooper talking about he and his spouse going through marriage counseling, just talking about it very openly. So that is how you create cultural change. And these are the basic things. I mean, they're so basic. And I think that's part of the reason why I just embrace Below 100 so much, because those 5 core tenets make so much sense. And the one that it was in my head my entire career was complacency kills. It was in my head all the time, because how many car accidents, crashes, wrecks that I walk up to over the years, not wearing my reflective vest. Oh, I got to remember to go back and get that, right? Because you do fall into this groove where you kind of do the same thing. The problem is if we're doing things the same way over and over, and we're recognizing it, those same things that we're doing are getting other people killed or injured, we need to change. We need to have those conversations both within ourselves, because we don't want to live in a glass house, but talk to those folks around you and say, listen, I'd love to hold you accountable. I want you to go home.
Yeah, and that's very well said. And I remember there was a back when we had foot beats on my agency, there was a beat officer who worked in the Northeast Market, which is a notorious place. And he worked it himself and had been there for a long time. But as he would see vehicles coming through the market, he would remind everybody to put their seatbelts on, and especially officers. And he was a master patrol officer, so he could tell officers in a scout car to, hey, put your seatbelt on. And I remember walking with him one day, and these folks were driving through the market. He stopped them. He's very pleasant, but he said, put your seatbelt on. And the woman said, okay, but she didn't do it. And he was a little abrasive with her, but he said, do it right now. And he really took it to heart, but he would engage with other officers the same way. So there were people even in 1993 who were trying to engage their peers and trying to develop that safety culture, but that was extremely, extremely rare.
Mm-hmm.
Noel brought to light during that conversation that there are insurance companies out there that will reduce the annuity paid out for an accident if you're not wearing your seatbelt.
Yeah, no, Matt, and to your point, there's some state agencies for law enforcement and or state employees that if you are in a crash and they find out that you did not have your seatbelt on, the stipend that they may pay your family is reduced if you're not wearing your seatbelt. I agreed with that. I thought that was a very strong incentive for you to wear your seatbelt, right? Because if you're severely injured and going to do workers' comp, or you've been killed, you're now actually hurting your family and whatever funds that they might receive.
You would think that the ultimate incentive, Nick, would be to live to fight another day. That's the ultimate incentive, right?
I would agree. Yeah, no, I agree with that. You're right. I thought Noel and David were very good in how they worked to try and engage a lot of different issues. It's always difficult sometimes to get folks to talk in that atmosphere openly, but I think even some of the virtual folks chimed in with questions and comments. So that was sort of the end of the presentations and speakers. We did invite 2 other individuals to come and present to the group with some emerging technology and some new things that are on the scene. The first one was a man named David Kelly from AccuSensus. Matter of fact, David used to work for NHTSA, and he was familiar with some of our NHTSA players. And he introduced a new technology that they've been using with commercial vehicles to prevent distracted driving. And I was impressed with this technology because primarily it's not a photo radar tool. It's not issuing a ticket to the unknown driver who just the owner of the vehicle gets that ticket, just like a photo radar or a red light ticket. This is tied to actual enforcement, where an officer downstream is going to pull that car over once they've had a chance to review the image that the cameras send them. So I would encourage folks to look at the AccuCensus program and how it's working. It's been around the world. I know they've introduced it in Australia. I think North Carolina and Georgia have been looking at it. They've been doing mostly commercial vehicles. And what it does, just to simply understand it, it's got cameras that are along the side of the road, and they're looking down in each one of the vehicles that are driving past, taking images, and then the AI of those cameras sense that someone is sitting there with their phone like this, right? Or like this. And they can see basically what they're doing in that car if it's not hands-free. And it can then send that image to a trooper downstream who gets an alert. They look at it, and then they make the determination as to whether or not that's something that they want to contact that driver for, or issue a ticket or a warning or whatever it is. But it's immediate enforcement, which is what I really appreciated it. Plus that unfortunately, but I found it humorous when he mentions all the weird things that they see people doing
Can only imagine.
in their cars, smoking with bongs and doing other things. And
now, Nick, I think one of the greatest part about that tool is that the portability factor. This is something that's essentially on a trailer. You can move it, and we know once folks know where the stationary cameras are in the city that I live in, we have cameras in several school zones. Right. And folks will just kind of moderate their speed based on the time on their watch and the flashing lights, right? They know that those cameras are there. However, this tool, a little bit different. You can move it. I mean, if they're using it in North Carolina, they're moving it from one side of the state to the other, kind of keeping it real. And, I love the fact that it's movable.
And then the other thing that we heard from Todd Lease, who many of you may know who he is. He used to work for the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission. He now works for Jacobs, but he's part of this effort called Penn Start, which is a new training and testing track, and it's really sort of a complex that is going to offer not only highway conditions but urban conditions, testing for autonomous vehicles, reconstruction of certain urban areas to look at what can happen in certain situations, places to work on speed and pursuits, places to test interdiction tools like a grappler or that kind of thing. And this is still in development, but with classrooms and a very large campus, I would encourage you to look up Penn Start and what they're doing out there in Western Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. And it's their hope that this becomes a national training site where not only local law enforcement, but DOT folks, fire and EMS, it'll be a site for traffic incident management, TIM training, right? To get everybody on the same page to reduce these secondary crashes when you're handling crash scenes. So I was very impressed to hear from that. And then Todd also took us through some new software, and this is reconstruction software and training software. So you can recreate in this software any hazardous incidents and get your folks to begin to recognize those hazards and how they want to position their vehicles, how close they want to get to it. And in the software, Todd took us through, and again, if you'd like to see it, you can click on the video on YouTube. We'll give you the address, and you can watch a little bit of an example of this software where you can create winter conditions, raining conditions, sunny conditions, fire, hazmat situations, campers, sedans, trailers, etc. And it's something that I think they're looking at wanting to share with agencies who want to play with it. Of course, you're going to ultimately have to buy this software, but I think they're willing to let agencies test it for a little bit to see if it's something they think is useful. Do you guys have any comments, Matt or Troy, anything else on those presentations?
Well, the only thing I'd like to say is that this emerging technology really comports with what we're trying to do here for making it safer and keeping names off the memorial walls. This is really great stuff. I know that there is a cost that comes along with this, but I would implore and encourage any administrator out there who has access to this technology, and there's clearly, just by watching the video of our forum, you're going to get a taste of some of the things that are out there. But I know as we travel around the country and go to some of these trade shows where, whether it's IACP or FLP or NSA or Lifesavers, we see some of these incredible technologies that are out there. Please go to some of these shows and engage with some of the people that have this technology, because it could save somebody on your department one day, or you. So really take the time to see some of the great stuff that's coming out there. I love both of those, two sides, both the camera. I like the software technology. I cannot wait to go up and see Penn Start. I can't wait to see that. I'm looking forward to it being all in place and ready for viewing. But really good stuff, and a special thank you to those folks who came out to share with us and the folks around the country some really just terrific technology.
Yeah, Matt.
I concur with that. It's fascinating to me to really see the role that technology is playing in law enforcement nowadays, because it really is a game changer in helping us to reduce the number of officers killed in the line of duty. But the other takeaway for me was the focus in to Todd's program, the focus on training more over the course of your career when it comes to EVOC, when it comes to driver training. We get it in the academy, and then you may get it once or twice, our agency, if you changed vehicles, not the make or the model of the vehicle, but if you went to something new, you would get a brief one-day training on the operation of that new vehicle. And Troy, I remember when we switched over from Crown Vics to Ford Tauruses, they said the car handles very differently. And just remember, you can't, just because the car handles differently, don't exceed your capabilities, right? So if the car in front of you is doing 120 to a call and you're not that skilled, do not go 120, right? Because you will crash. So the fact that we are looking at the importance of continuing driver training throughout the course of your career is significant, and that emphasis on it. And to Todd's program, the fact that they're putting out not just a physical structure out there, but that they're using software, right, to improve training, to bring to light. And sometimes all it takes is that one training that points out something you've been doing wrong for years, and you say, whoa, and you hit the brakes, and you make a change, and that change could save your life. And you may never even know it, but you have to be open to the fact. And that's the culture. You have to be open to the fact that change is good. It's not always bad. Change can be good, and we have to be open to that.
Matt, you brought to mind. I'm a big fan of an old cop show called Adam 12, and there was an episode where the two main characters, Reed and Malloy, are sent back to driver's training, and it was part of their regular in-service rotation. Every few years, they would take their officers and put them back on the track. And I remember one of the things the instructor in that episode says, he says, let's make sure you're not continuing with some of the bad habits we've seen out there. And it was not only an EVOC course to make sure they know when to get on the brake and when to get on the gas and when to slow down, skid pans and all that, but it was really the instructor making sure that you are doing everything you're supposed to do, including wearing your seatbelt. And this is back from 1970 something. Yeah. So some of this stuff isn't new. It's stuff that we just need to continue to do. And to your point, I never went through a refresher for EVOC and pursuit training in my agency probably for 10 years. And the only time I had to go back through a refresher was when I had a crash. And that was an at-fault crash on my side that I don't want to talk about. But anyway.
Oh, please.
But that reminds me of one important thing before we close out here. And it's something that John Wetzel, who is a retired sheriff from Oklahoma, who came all the way out to see John Marshall get his award, he was very poignant in reminding us through his own personal tragedy that these are not accidents. And he said very poignantly, my wife and child did not get killed because of an accident. These are not accidents. They're crashes or wrecks or I think he might have said collisions. I hope I'm not misquoting him, but he has always been very passionate about making sure we don't call them accidents, and I slip up as well. We all do. But his point is well taken that there's negligence involved, right? It's not an accident. There's negligence involved. And that's one of the things that we have to work towards improving as well is distraction on our own part, and controlling all the things that we've just discussed. So, so that's really a briefing for how this forum went. I hope it didn't go too long, and I hope you guys watching folks are able to draw out some of the salient points that really came out of it. Troy mentioned a study that's being done. There is a person by the name of Melanie Fowler, who's a lieutenant commander in the Public Health Service, who used to work for CDC and used to do a lot of fatal crash investigations. She has been doing her dissertation studying law enforcement use or lack thereof of seatbelts and getting information as to why that is and collecting all of those, I'm going to call them excuses, for why officers don't wear their seatbelt. And hopefully we'll talk more about that study when she's finally done publishing. Any final thoughts?
I don't. I think it was a terrific forum. I hope that folks have certainly gained something from our time here, just in our panel talking about it. But I would encourage if folks have the time to go and watch it in its entirety. I always get a takeaway from it, and this is coming from somebody who does this still every day, right? Looking for those preventable safety factors, right? How can we make it safer? Really good stuff. I really commend you, Nick, for pulling together an impressive array of talent. Really great stuff. I don't think folks can appreciate how much effort goes into bringing people to our nation's capital who are willing to share their knowledge. And I think it's important that you do it. You continue to do great work. I want to thank NHTSA for the continued relationship that we have. I mean, I can't say enough good about not only their work, but their passion for our work, which is making it safer. So I just want to thank them again, thank my entire team, because without our officer safety and wellness team, these events simply would not happen. But Nick, certainly kudos to you for all the work you did.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Matt, any final thoughts?
I really don't. But to jump on to what Troy just said, even in preparation for today, going back and rewatching, I took several pages of notes, and I sat through the presentation. We've had discussions about the presenters and the information in there, but even going back, there were things that I had not picked up on or details that I sort of had overlooked during the first presentation. So it's definitely worth to go back, even if you've already seen it, to go back and listen to the presenters and the information that they're sharing.
All right. All right. Well, I want to thank you both very much. And I also want to thank our technical crew who's on the other side of this, helping do this. And of course, as always, we thank our sponsors. And Troy already thanked our core, really main sponsor, apart from Wheeling Engineering, NHTSA. And we look forward to continue our partnership with NHTSA. And this video, once completely edited, will be part of what we give out at IACP. So it should be completed and on our website, but also we hand out flash drives at IACP that contain all of our videos, safety videos, our infographics and information sheets. We give them out to people at our booth for free, and it's a flash drive that you can plug into your computer that contains a whole lot of information. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and I appreciate your interest in law enforcement, public safety. And as always, we are striving to keep names off the wall. Thank you.